For the Clarity Crew, I'm Gebhards, and Jesus Christ expects you to vote on November 3rd. This is a whole 5 minutes on why the Bible commands and expects us to vote. And as Christians, I should have earlier in my life felt more significantly the burden, the responsibility, the expectation of God on my life to vote and to be a more diligent student. This is an extremely important electoral cycle. And I want you to understand that from the Bible, I believe that we're responsible to vote. And here are 4 reasons why that's the case. Number 1, Jesus expects you to be a good citizen and vote. Mark 12:17, Jesus, again, when challenged about taxation, says the very famous phrase, "Render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, and render to God that which is God's." And ultimately, he's invoking the reality that Imago Dei, that we are made in the image of God, and that we have a responsibility to God on a broad spectrum of responsibilities. But in a small way, there's a sliver of our life in being responsible to God where we're responsible to the government. Jesus expects us to be good citizens of the earth and to be responsive to governing authorities. That's number 1. Jesus expects you to vote. Number 2, the government expects you to vote, and we're called to be submissive to the government. Romans 13:1. Again, God makes the point, and here from the pen of Paul, about our responsibility. Romans 13:1. This is our second point about the government expecting us to be good citizens and vote. Romans 13:1. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. So what we see here in Romans 13:1 through 7 actually is an entire paragraph on the topic of government and its role being instituted, created by God. It's given by God as an authority over our lives. And while the government does not tell us to vote or make us vote, there's not a law that we have to vote, the government functions and is established based on our vote. And so the government expects us to vote. And so being submissive to our government as instituted by God, we should then be responsive and for sure should vote. Number 1, Jesus expects us to be a good citizen and vote. Number 2, the government, which is instituted by God, expects us to be a good citizen and vote. Number 3, it is loving to our neighbor to vote. It's interesting to me that Romans 13:8, the very next sentiment or thought following this paragraph about the government, is that we as Christians should owe no one anything except to love them. And truly it's a loving thing for us to extend what's right, good, and wise in the government. And that's a part of our responsibility in voting. In fact, our next session in Clarity Crew is going to be the policies that are important to God on the ballot. I want to give you 7 or 8 policies that are important to Him according to Scripture, so that you as a Christian can think biblically about the policies of consequence as far as God is concerned related to government. But all that to say, it's loving for us to know those policies, to be biblical about them, our conscience in one hand, our Bible in the other, and then be active. It's loving. We owe love to our neighbor. So get out there and promote what's wise, honorable, and what leads to human flourishing through your vote. That's number 3. And number 4, lastly, this is interesting to me because we are a constitutional republic, and the basis of that constitutional republic is that we're a democracy, which means government of the people. We're not purely or ultimately a rank democracy, as Mike Lee put it, but rather we do have at the foundation of our government a demos, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. What exactly is my point in making this finely tuned constitutional point? It's this, is that if God has given authority to a government, we need to recognize here in America that that government, more than anything, is the people. We have the authority through our vote, and we need to execute that authority by voting for the Electoral College, who again then moves in the presidential election. And again, the point that I'm trying to make is, if God has given a responsibility to a people, it's to the people of our nation ultimately to exercise that authority through our vote. So fourth, we're responsible as far as God is concerned because He's given us the privilege of voting in a constitutional republic that functions as a democracy. So get out there and vote. Jesus expects it, the government expects it as instituted by God. It's loving to your neighbor, and ultimately the government functions by, for, and through us. And so go out there and vote November 3rd, 2020. This is important. Honor God with it. For the Clarity Crew, I'm Kurt Gebhards. Be encouraged, be challenged, be clear.